Stupidity is not just an individual flaw. It's a force that has shaped the world in ways people rarely acknowledge. It's the silent architect of history's greatest disasters, the reason behind countless wars, economic collapses, and broken societies. Yet, it remains the one force people refuse to take seriously. People often assume stupidity is about intelligence, that it only affects those who lack knowledge. But the most dangerous kind of stupidity has nothing to do with IQ. It's when people know better but refuse to act accordingly. When the truth is obvious but ignored. When entire populations follow destructive ideas even when the consequences are right in front of them. One of the most catastrophic examples of this played out in the late 19th century during the construction of the Panama Canal, a project that could have revolutionized global trade decades earlier, but instead became one of history's greatest engineering failures. A French company, led by Ferdinand de Lesseps, the man who had successfully built the Suez Canal, attempted to construct the canal through Panama using the same method that had worked in Egypt, a sea-level canal with no locks. There was just one massive problem. Panama was nothing like Egypt. The terrain was mountainous, the jungles were infested with deadly diseases, and the engineering methods were completely inadequate. The warnings were clear from the beginning. Experts told de Lesseps that a lock-based system was the only realistic way to build the canal, but he dismissed them. Instead of adjusting to the reality of the situation, he pressed forward with blind optimism, ignoring all evidence to the contrary. The result? Over 22,000 workers died from malaria and yellow fever. The company burned through $287 million, an astronomical amount at the time, and after 9 years of failure, the entire project collapsed. Investors were ruined, and de Lesseps was convicted of fraud. All of this could have been prevented if those in charge had simply listened. But this is how stupidity operates. It isn't just ignorance. It's the refusal to adapt, the arrogance of believing that reality will bend to your will. Empires have fallen because of this. Governments have collapsed, not because of outside threats, but because of their own refusal to acknowledge reality. The Roman Empire, one of the most powerful civilizations in history, rotted from within. Not because it lacked knowledge or strategy, but because greed, corruption, and reckless decision-making blinded those in power. They knew they were heading toward disaster, but they continued anyway. History repeats this pattern. The Great Depression wasn't an accident. It was the direct result of reckless economic decisions made by those who should have known better. Time and time again, societies crumble, not due to external enemies, but because of their own collective refusal to change course. And yet, stupidity isn't just about failure. It's about momentum. The more a society ignores its mistakes, the faster it collapses. Stupidity doesn't just exist in individuals. It compounds when people reinforce each other's worst instincts. A single bad idea can spiral into something much larger when no one is willing to challenge it. This is why history books tend to focus on great minds, great discoveries, and great leaders. But they rarely talk about the great mistakes that shaped the world just as much. There's an entire hidden history of human stupidity, of decisions that could have changed everything if only they had been made differently. If stupidity is this powerful, what does that mean for today? It's easy to look at history and recognize these patterns in hindsight. But what about now? What are the modern-day examples of this same force at work? That's where the conversation really begins. Stupidity isn't just a mistake, it's a system. It isn't just an accident, it's self-sustaining. And the reason it still dictates so much of the world today is because it has evolved to be efficient, profitable, and incredibly contagious. It doesn't matter how much information is available, the idea that if people had more knowledge, they'd make better decisions has been proven wrong over and over again. We live in an age where every fact, every study, every historical lesson is instantly accessible. Yet, people aren't becoming wiser. They're becoming more irrational, more tribal, and more resistant to truth. Because stupidity isn't about lack of knowledge, it's about what people do with knowledge. And today, knowledge is no longer about understanding. It's about confirmation. People don't look for information to learn. They look for information to reinforce what they already believe. This is why stupidity doesn't just exist in individuals. It operates collectively. Entire groups, movements, industries, and institutions are built on the preservation of bad ideas. The more people buy into something, the harder it is to break free. Even smart people fall for stupidity, because intelligence doesn't make you immune to tribal thinking, emotional manipulation, or cognitive bias. In fact, some of the smartest people are the easiest to fool, because they believe they're too smart to be fooled. History has shown this over and over again. Nobel Prize winners have fallen for scientific frauds. Political leaders with elite educations have made catastrophic decisions. Billionaires have been scammed out of fortunes because intelligence is only as good as your willingness to question yourself. And once someone believes they're too smart to be manipulated, they stop questioning. And that's when they become easy to control. And stupidity doesn't just exist in isolation, it spreads like a virus. It infects societies in ways that most people never notice, and by the time they do, it's already too late. One of the main ways stupidity spreads is through emotion. People don't act on facts, they act on how things make them feel. If something sounds good, feels right, or fits their worldview, they accept it without question. Fear, anger, and certainty are the perfect breeding grounds for stupidity. Fear makes people react instead of thinking. Anger makes them double down on bad ideas. And certainty convinces them that they're right, even when all evidence says otherwise. This is why misinformation spreads faster than truth. This is why a lie that feels good will always outperform a truth that is complicated. And this is exactly why stupidity is rewarded instead of punished. Because stupidity isn't just allowed, it's profitable. Look at modern media. Outrage and controversy drive views, clicks, and engagement. The more extreme a headline, the faster it spreads. The more emotional a message, the harder it sticks. Truth is slow, complicated, and often boring, but stupidity, it's instant, addictive, and profitable. This isn't an accident. This is how the system is designed. Politics rewards stupidity because simple answers win elections. Nobody wants to hear a complex, nuanced solution. They want to hear something that feels right, even if it's completely false. Social media rewards stupidity because rage, division, and sensationalism keep people addicted. The more irrationally emotional people become, the more engagement they generate. Stupidity protects itself. Try to argue with a deeply misled person, and they don't listen. They get defensive. Try to correct misinformation, and people resist even harder. Because stupidity isn't just about being wrong, it's about identity. People don't want to change their minds because their beliefs define them. And if they admit they're wrong, they feel like they're losing part of themselves. This is why fighting stupidity is nearly impossible. Because logic doesn't work when people are driven by emotion. Facts don't change minds when people are invested in their beliefs. And truth will always lose to whatever feels better, spreads faster, and makes more money. So what can you actually do about it? The only way to not get caught up in stupidity is to constantly question yourself. To remain skeptical not just of others, but of your own beliefs, your own biases, your own emotional reactions. Because stupidity thrives in certainty. The more certain you are about something, the less likely you are to see when you're wrong. The more you feel angry, outraged, or emotionally reactive, the more vulnerable you are to being manipulated. And most people, they'll never realize it. Because stupidity doesn't just blind people to the truth, it blinds them to the fact that they're blind. But if you see it, if you recognize it happening, then at least you have a chance to step back before it pulls you in too. There's a strange thing that happens when you start seeing stupidity for what it is. You start noticing it everywhere. In conversations, in the news, in decisions made by people who should know better. And at first, it feels frustrating. You want to shake people awake. You want to explain to show them how they're being led in circles, how they're making the same mistakes that people made centuries ago. But then, something clicks. You realize they don't want to see it. Because stupidity isn't just a lack of intelligence, it's comfort, it's security, it's the feeling of belonging, of certainty, of not having to question everything. And most people would rather be wrong and comfortable than right and alone. That's when the frustration turns into something else. Understanding. You realize that fighting stupidity head-on is like trying to punch fog. You can throw all the logic, all the evidence, all the reasoning you want at it, and it will just absorb it, twist it, turn it back on you. You'll be called arrogant, out of touch, delusional. And after a while, you start to understand why the wisest people in history learn to choose their battles. That doesn't mean you have to stay silent, but you stop wasting your energy trying to wake up people who are determined to stay asleep. And then something even stranger happens. You start turning that same harsh lens inward. You start realizing that even you have blind spots, moments where you've fallen for your own comforting lies. You start questioning the things you've always believed, the emotions that used to feel like absolute truth. And in that moment, something shifts. You no longer feel the need to fight stupidity. You feel the need to not be a part of it. That's the real challenge. Not trying to fix the world, not trying to force people to think differently, but making sure that you don't fall into the same traps. That you don't get swept up in the illusion of certainty, that you don't become just another voice adding to the noise. Because the truth is, stupidity isn't going anywhere. It's always been here, shaping history, shaping societies, shaping minds. And you can either get dragged into it like everyone else, or you can step back, think for yourself, and refuse to play the game.